Hello, everybody, and welcome to Theory Underground. I'm your host today, David McKerracher, and this is the hip hop panel on the Theorizing the Underground mini conference day, which is happening on July 18th, 2023. So if you're with us in the live audience, welcome. If you're watching this on YouTube after the fact, welcome. And if you see this anywhere else out in the wild, now or in the future, then great to have you. We're going to be thinking about underground music through hip hop specifically. And so the first thing we're going to do here is give everybody an opportunity to introduce themselves, where they're coming from into this conversation and what they'll be talking about. And we'll go in the order of Jason, Michael, Cadell, and Tony.
There we go. My name is Jason Myles. I host a show called This Is Revolution Podcast. I spent years in hip hop and hardcore and heavy music. I guess my first recording memories as a 15-year-old in 1993 were recording at little bootleg underground studios, doing hip hop music. And I performed it live, and there was a very vibrant underground scene where I'm from in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I'll be talking about ideas around authenticity and hip hop.
Hi, I am Michael Downs. I'm the author of the Dangerous Maybe blog on Medium, and at one point in my life, it's kind of funny to say now, I was an underground rapper for a couple years, and really great memories of that time in my life. My best friend is still a rapper. His name's Cadell. We met and spent a couple of years working on music together and everything. And what I'm going to be talking about is primarily underground theory and how I see it relating to the events.
All right, great to be here. Great to be with you, Dave, Michael. Great to meet you, Jason, Tony. My name's Cadell Last, primarily working on Philosophy Portal. If anyone's interested, you can go to philosophyportal.online, and everything I do is basically there. I definitely grew up on hip hop. I probably started getting into it probably around the year 1999, 2000, when I was in middle school. And it's been probably I've never created, but it's been definitely the dominant genre for me in terms of listening preference. And in terms of the topic, what I'm going to bring to the conversation is basically I'm going to talk about the relationship, or a hypothetical relationship, between the idea of free association in psychoanalysis and the idea of the freestyle in hip hop. So I want to think through the relationship between free association and freestyle, because I think there's a lot there in terms of like therapy, culture, and thinking about psychoanalysis outside of the clinic, and also thinking about the way in which our culture is expressing a free association like ethos. So that's me.
Yeah, my name is Tony. I run the YouTube channel One Dime, and also the podcast One Dime Radio. Probably, I would guess the reason I was invited here by Dave is probably because I did the video called "The Culture Industry: How Capitalism Ruined Hip Hop." And in the thumbnail, it says I'm talking about mumble rap, but I think Dave just put that so people would click on it. I don't really believe in that really concept of mumble rap as a category, but I basically people who are hip hop heads, use that term to kind of describe a lot of not so lyrically great hip hop. And so what I'm really more want to talk about, instead of that, rather, is stuff related to what I made a video on, the culture industry, famously popularized by Theodore Adorno, and kind of how that relates to hip hop, but also more broadly talking about the judgment of music, relativism, and also I want to touch on enjoyment when it comes to listening to hip hop in the psychoanalytic sense, in the Lacanian sense. And I'm very curious how, especially Michael and Cadell and Dave really think about that, because I know you guys have talked a lot about Žižek and the con. So yeah, I'm very excited to be here.
That's everybody, right? So I'm not going to be a presenter. I'm kind of going to do maybe a little facilitation, but for the most part, it's going to be you all just presenting in that same order again. These presentations are basically 10 to 15 minutes. They don't have to be super well thought out or written, but if they are, Jason's for the hardcore segment was, don't feel bad. It doesn't need to be. You can do a little freestyling yourself if you want. But with that said, afterwards, there will be an opportunity for the audience to ask questions. I asked people in the audience to take your role in the audience more seriously than you typically do if you're watching something on YouTube or listening to a podcast. Typically, we listen to such things in a more or less passive way. It takes a little bit more to do so actively. And active listening can often mean some kind of like note-taking or something along those lines. So maybe jot some ideas down as far as things that you would like to ask the presenters about. Because in the hardcore segment, I didn't make this plug. I failed to remember to do that. There weren't as many questions from the audience. There was still a great conversation. No regrets. But I do kind of just want to encourage the audience to think about that. It's a small group we have here, and so every person's thoughts ultimately matters. So with that said, thank you so much, and we're going to start here with Jason Myles. Take the floor. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Very excited to be here. Was a little nervous about both panels, to be honest. Never know how certain opinions are going to be taken. I will preface anything I'm going to say by saying I am a fan of hip hop music, not a fan of all of it, like any genre of music. I do appreciate the fact that hip hop has aged enough where there is music for me. I do not have to like everything that comes out that's new, and that's okay. I don't want it to go away. I just don't have to like it. We did a show recently asking a question on This Is Revolution. Is hip hop revolutionary? And we originally wanted to be more about the culture itself and not so much about the music. And I think what we're talking about here is more so about the music and not the overall umbrella culture of hip hop. And definitely we kind of all agree that no, it's not inherently revolutionary. I mean, maybe at best you get a lot of Black nationalism in hip hop, and definitely post the blow up of groups like the Native Tongues in the 90s, you get a lot of what maybe almost pejoratively is called backpack rap, which is a lot of preaching to a choir, in my opinion. So no, I don't think hip hop has like a lot of revolutionary capacity, or as it ever was supposed to. I mean, it's music that is the perfect soundtrack for neoliberalism. That being said, there is an interesting idea about authenticity when it comes to hip hop that I think really sits alone from even the hardcore genre, where almost an acceptance of underclass ideology is a part of the music. I watched a video recently of the now deceased rapper Nipsey Hussle, and it was a short video. I guess I also have to admit I do like watching a lot of shitty short Instagram and YouTube videos. And in this video, Nipsey Hussle's getting out of his car, and there's some fans that want to take his picture. I don't know if you guys have seen this video before, and they're asking for a selfie. And he is being pretty adamant about not wanting to take a selfie. And he says at one point, the two people, it sounds like a man and a woman that are trying to get the picture. They say, but you're a celebrity. And he goes, I'm not a celebrity, I'm a Crip. And then he says the affiliation of the Crip gang he's with. And it says to the people that, had he had a gun on him, he would have, possibly killed them for asking for a picture. I found this whole exchange extremely interesting because, first of all, you are a celebrity. You literally call yourself Nipsey Hussle based off the Black comedian and actor Nipsey Russell. And last I checked, there's not too many gangsters naming themselves after old comedians. And this isn't to disrespect the man, but I think there's a lot of playing up a certain identity that people want to see. Of course, Nipsey Russell wanted to be famous. That's why he pursued hip hop to the level he pursued it at. He was more famous, I would say, than well-known musically, which most of the newer rappers can say. I mean, hip hop nowadays is less about your 5 mic status in the source, since that's kind of gone anyway, and more about the publicity you can drum up through intra hip hop beef, or rumors about who you are on the streets. And it's having some interesting side effects that we kind of saw a little bit of in the 80s. And I think it's getting taken a little too far with hip hop, where from time to time you'd see lyrics on trial. I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember when Judas Priest was on trial for the Backwards records. You're seeing something similar in hip hop right now, where some of the lyrics of these rappers are going on trial, because again, much like with heavy metal, where you're kind of playing up a certain fantasy image of demons and devils and witches and warlocks, it may seem a little more realistic for some reason in hip hop when you're playing up images of you being a drug kingpin and a murderer. Definitely there have been some well-known hip hop murders, and definitely there have been people involved with the genre that have been to prison. And maybe with the rise of 50 Cent, we've seen kind of the authenticity of rappers be more important than their lyrical ability. I find the whole thing, very interesting, that we still have to have a certain level of authenticity in this music to take, these people serious as musicians, as rappers. And I find that somewhat problematic. There's definitely a bit of a racist element to it all. So much so that we've kind of even redefined what cooning is, to be, maybe someone acting white, and not, kind of being playing up your underclass blackness for a white audience. So for me personally, I kind of ask these questions about authenticity because I'd like to hear what other people think about that, because it's almost as if rappers really have to be drug dealers or murderers or self-claimed murderers to be taken seriously, when in reality, they're just entertainers. Let's remember, Public Enemy weren't Black Panthers. They were literally dancing on stage with toy guns. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Jason.
All right. So, Dave, if this ends up going, my tendency, if I start going a little long, just cut me off wherever you need to, and that'll be that. So, yeah, I guess I want to just start off, especially today, talking about this term underground theory. It really emerged out of an ongoing conversation I was having with Dave about a year ago, and we were talking about this whole thing that all of us are really a part of, this online podcast education theory, whatever it is, right, that we're all doing in our own ways. And for me, I just noticed that there's a certain underground dimension to it. And I was curious about how this possibility of what could underground philosophy or underground theory even be, and what kind of potential does it have? And so I kept talking about this underground thing, and Dave was like, well, it's theory underground and underground theory and all that. And so it emerged out of our conversation. And for me, I'm still, it's not like I have the answer. It's more of something I'm still trying to figure out myself, of what this can be. I will say up front, I see a really special potential in it. I think everything that is going on with the podcasts and the YouTube videos and the blogs. I know blogs are kind of less of a thing. I'm still holding on to the blog format, but I see something special in it, and I see in this potential, the ability to facilitate an event. And that's what I think so many of us, if we spend our time talking about politics, or we spend our time talking about philosophy, it's because we see a fundamental breakdown in the world, that it seems like nothing is possible. We can't experiment with anything new. We're stuck in what Fisher would call capitalist realism. There's an inertia right now, and I think we're all in our own ways trying to think through that and find a path forward, or if we don't discover it ourselves, facilitate the ability to try to think the future, right? And this is what I admire most about what we're all doing, and I'm not cynical about it. I don't have any ironic distance towards the podcast and the YouTube videos and all of this. I really think it's important. And so what I'm going to try to do here is talk about the possibility of an event that could possibly emerge from this. So, but okay, and just to say, right, Dave, in his recent talk he gave with Cadell at Philosophy Portal, talked about this difference between scene and milieu, right? And the scene that we see going on right now, how could it turn into a robust intellectual milieu? I think we all in our own right want to be as intellectually rigorous as we can be. But the question is, how do we facilitate it to go in that direction? And I think Dave is important to point out this distinction between scene and milieu. But okay, yeah. So I just mentioned briefly that when I was a teenager, I spent some time pursuing rap and rapping, and being part of the Kansas City underground scene. Again, my best friend was Blydell, and still is Blydell, and he's still rapping. But for about a year, we spent recording his first album, Lone Rider. And back at this time, it was a thing, like you couldn't go to a gas station in Kansas City without somebody trying to sell you a mixtape or a demo or whatever. It was everywhere. And it was like, the joke was everybody's best friend is a rapper. But it was really a fun time to be here in Kansas City. And so everybody was trying to, find recording studios or sell their music at gas stations or get their albums or CDs into Seventh Heaven, which was the main local hip hop music store. And I mean, we had this big scene, but the big names, of course, were Tech Nine, 57th Street Road Dog Villains, Rich the Factor, Mr. Stinky, Lee Joe, Midwest Mafia, Veterans Clique, Southside Posse, Vel Bacardi, Al Fox, Romeo Ronell, The Popper, Incredible Zig, Hobo Tone, Grant Rice, just to name a few. But what I wanted to point out is, I guess, like, what did my time in this underground hip hop scene in Kansas City do for me? And like, how does it relate to this underground theory thing? I guess for me, what it really started to develop an awareness of is there was always this issue with institutional authority, right? How do you get your music played on the radio? Well, there's a whole capitalist dimension to it. You got to know the right people. It's social capital. If you have somebody who can hook you up. And so there's a lot of these dimensions of capitalism, especially, that even before I was into theory, I was getting a kind of basic familiarity with, just from trying to navigate this scene and get music played, right? And but it also is like, it got me tapped into how taught me about how something I would call authentic and singular, how it ends up getting commodified and sold and packaged. And so there's that whole dimension to it. And you're trying to deal with investors, or I've seen so many times Bly would meet somebody and they would try to get them to sign a contract within a couple days, and trying to navigate this whole capitalist dimension to it was really informative. And so but here's the thing, even back then, it was this whole emergence of hip hop from the 80s, but especially in the mid to late 90s, where I think hip hop qualifies as a Bedouin event, a truth event, at least in the artistic sense. I think what Jason was saying is really important about thinking through, like, can hip hop be a political event? That's a big question. And I sympathize a lot with Jason's take on this. But I do think it qualifies as an art event, where hip hop, just sonically speaking, came out and music would never be the same. It ruptured the status quo artistically. It was a true game changer. Every aspect of music now, you almost can find hip hop infused in it in some way. And this just started off as this little background, like, community in New York of artists experimenting, and artistically it just completely changed the world internationally. And so I think viewing it as an art event, and having grown up at that time where I was young and it was something really special to me, it got me tapped into what an event can be in this Bedouin sense of something that comes on the social scene and totally ruptures the status quo, and things are never the same. And there's a fidelity to it. Hip hop heads really have a faith, a fidelity in hip hop that orients their whole subjectivity, right? So there's a faithfulness to the art event of hip hop. So I guess that dimension, and then also seeing the capitalist dimension of it, really prepared me to think about capitalism, think about philosophy in this, especially in this concept of the event. And so I guess that's part of what is going on now, where I'm trying to, in some sense, retroactively, what we're doing now is changing how I even view what was going on in my life back then with underground hip hop. So what is underground theory? Well, there's obviously a cluster of characteristics or elements to it that I think a lot of us would agree on. One, the internet is obviously a part of this, right? I don't think we would see this emerging subculture offline, right, or without the internet. So the internet is pretty much elemental here, I think, to it. I think, like I mentioned a little bit ago, I think this whole idea of the future's been canceled, that we don't feel like we have any meaningful futures. I think this is a key element of why so many young people in particular are getting interested in philosophy. For me, growing up in the 80s and 90s, being a mall rat, it was unthinkable that you'd have a bunch of young Americans wanting to read Kant or Sartre, or it was unthinkable that young people would want, that's how they would want to spend their time, is reading philosophy or theory. And so to me, I have this, it's almost Heideggerian, but it's, if society had kept on working, take that with a grain of salt, but if it had allowed young people to kind of live the same standard of living their parents and grandparents had, I don't think we would see this. I think this is a response to a breakdown in the very functionality of their worlds, which has a lot to do with the future being canceled, or them feeling deeply that they are without a future. And so it's Heidegger's tool analysis. You don't really stand back and evaluate a hammer unless it's broken. If you have a hammer and it works, you're just busy using it. You don't really notice it. It withdraws. In a sense, experientially, it just merges with your arm. There's really no distinction. Well, if the future itself breaks down, then where do you go to try to evaluate it? Well, you're going to probably go to philosophy and theory. And so I think that's why we're seeing that. And then on top of it, I mean, the other element would just be the growing disillusionment with the university, and that people don't feel like the university is the place to go to get ideas. It's STEM based, it's job based, and then it doesn't even guarantee you a future now. Getting a degree doesn't promise you anything. So that's tapped into the futurelessness issue again. So I think that it all kind of forms a circuit here. But part of it, because we have a freedom that professional academics don't have, we're able to experiment with aesthetics and styles, and I mean, so many options are open to us that aren't open to them. And I mean, despite the issues with Nick Land, there's this one line that the CCRU said that I think resonates with what we're doing. They said, "Our assumption throughout was that philosophy/social theory could be exciting, and that the deadening of all visceral response to intellectual exchange was a semi-deliberate strategy serving oppressive social interests." And if you keep philosophy and social theory, etc., boring, right, you're not going to draw in the youth in any major way. And so, of course, their strategy was to mix it with music and drugs and everything, right? They turned it into a scene. And so, but I relate to this idea of bringing different energy to it, bringing different moods, bringing different attitudes to philosophy than just the boring scholarly disposition, right? And I think, again, everybody I know who's part of this is doing that in some way, shape, or form.
Mikey, you got about 3 minutes to wrap it up here. 3 minutes.
Okay. Then what I want to just say is, look, philosophy has always been about challenging basic presuppositions. It's always gone to the point of, we're going to challenge the most basic master signifiers or fundamental presuppositions within a society. This is what Socrates was doing. And insofar as, in a sense, that's what we're all doing, we're kind of engaging in a collective Socratism. Like we are Legion, we are Socrates as Legion or something. And again, as it's not to somebody could easily go, oh, well, how narcissistic you think you guys are with your little courses and your podcasts and your YouTube videos. You think you're going to change the world. No, nobody, one person is going to do it, but collectively there is this opening up of the ability to question the basic presuppositions, especially of American society, in a way that I haven't seen before. And I think that's where the potential of an event, something that could come along, rupture the status quo, and open up a new beginning, there's a possibility there. I don't think traditional American religion, especially Christian fundamentalism, has the potential to do this. I don't think science does, because science doesn't work that way. It doesn't generate subcultures. Science is something you actually have to kind of professionally do to really do it. Art, I don't think art captures Americans in particular as much. And then you get into the conflict we just saw, like, okay, hip hop could be an artistic event, but is it necessarily a political one? That's an issue. I honestly think philosophy or theory has a really powerful potential to open up a shift, to rupture the status quo. And I think we're all, in a sense, conjuring this event, facilitating this event with all of our various types of contributions. And so I guess that's what I see as, and look, maybe it goes nowhere. We don't know. We won't know until the future quilts it retroactively and tells us what we were doing. But right now, I do see this potential for the event in underground theory. And so it is. It's kind of, I see all of us participating in a kind of collective Socratic questioning, and who knows where that goes.
Thanks, Mikey.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So I guess I'll take over now.
Yes, welcome, Cadell.
Yeah. So thanks, Jason and Mikey. I just want to say right off the bat, I really liked what you said, Jason, about hip hop as the perfect soundtrack for neoliberalism. But I also liked what you said about authenticity and hip hop being sort of this acceptance of underclass ideology in hip hop as well. And like, I think that's a really interesting thing to think through. And hopefully at the end of my talk, I'll point a little bit towards that. And Mikey, I also totally agree with your sentiments in regards to underground theory having such a radical potential. And yeah, we don't know where it's going, and it could all just end in an absolute negativity. But I think what we are doing is trying to make philosophy and social theory exciting, and hopefully we can take it a different direction conceptually than Nick Land took his took his work. And I like some of the things you've had to say about Nick Land. So, all right. So I basically have something very simple to say, and I'm gonna try and say it in reference to a few quotes. The title is called "The Magic of Words," and what I'm trying to do is think through the potential revolutionary relationship, who knows, between free association, which is the fundamental law or the fundamental method of psychoanalysis, and freestyle, which is arguably, the creative foundation of, if not hip hop, I think certainly rap, as a mode of expression and as a mode of playing with. And I'll bring it back to the magic of words. What does that mean? The magic of words. It sounds spooky. And it sounds almost like pre-modern. Well, I think here I go back to not a famous, but as far as my research takes me, the first paper Freud wrote in a psychoanalytic direction, in a paper called Psychical Treatment from 1890, where he literally starts off talking about the magic of words and thinking about the magic of words in the context of the scientific universe. Psychoanalysis basically emerged in this problem of not taking emotional excesses related to neuroses seriously, and basically reducing them to biological functions, as opposed to thinking that they might have something to do with psychology, that they might have something to do with language. So in that regard, let me just give a quote that Freud's talking about what he means with the magic of words. Here's a quote. "Psychical treatment denotes treatment taking its start in the mind. Treatment by measures which operate in the first instance and immediately upon the human mind. Foremost among such measures is the use of words, and words are the essential tool of mental treatment. A layman will no doubt find it hard to understand how pathological disorders of the body and the mind can be eliminated by mere words. He will feel that he is being asked to believe in magic, and he will not be so very wrong. For the words which we use in our everyday speech are nothing other than watered down magic. But we shall have to follow a roundabout path in order to explain how science sets about restarting to words a path, at least, of their former magical power." End quote. So what Freud's saying there is actually what we say to each other in day-to-day interactions and having these conversations, get, like Mikey was saying, getting together, doing podcasts or writing blogs or whatever. We shouldn't underestimate, or for the people in the audience who are actively listening, like Dave was suggesting, taking notes, don't underestimate how powerful words are and how transformative they can be, how therapeutic even potentially words can be. And that's weird for the modern scientific mind to think, but I think that's really what Freud was trying to do with psychoanalysis, was to, we should get rid of a lot of the sort of, magical thinking from the pre-scientific world, which had no understanding of basic causality or basic rules of materialism. But there is still something interesting about words, and we should pay close attention to that. Now, moving a little bit further to Lacan, I just want to get to what is free association here, because that's basically what Freud's method involves. Free association is basically not paying so much attention to a clearly structured narrative, but paying attention to like Freud would say, dreams, slips of the tongue, bungled actions. And so free association is basically the combination of what Freud would call the law of non-omission, basically do not censor yourself, and the law of non-systematization. So not basically privileging incoherence to coherence. So let me just sort of bring this into what I'm trying to say here is, one, not omitting anything, not censoring yourself at all. On two, being willing to be incoherent, willing to not be coherent, right? Usually when we present our discourse in public, polite society, we're constantly censoring our mind. We're not just saying anything that comes to our mind. And we are trying to be coherent. We're not actively playing with incoherence. And so free association in that sense is quite radical. Free association is radical in the sense that it's actually interested in uncensored thought. And free association is also interested in an intelligence in incoherence. So I just want to say that in regards to that way of thinking about language, that way of thinking about words, I think there is some potential connection to freestyle, because in freestyle, you're sort of almost playing with, in obviously like just a pure freestyle, not with pre-written words, but in a pure freestyle, you're just playing with the language which is running through your mind. You're not censoring it. You're just trying to play with the language which is emerging. And there's not an a priori coherence. Of course, if you're using pre-writtens, then that's not the case. But if you're truly freestyling, then you're in some sense playing with incoherence, and you're open to it. And what's interesting is that retroactively, for people who get really good at freestyling, retroactively there is a deep meaning or a coherence that emerges in speech. So just to sort of use a final point, I just want to use one of my favorite interviews this is like one of the first interviews I stumbled upon when I got into hip hop, which is, I'm Canadian. So it was an interview from 1999 with Eminem on Much Music, interviewed by Master T. And I can send the link anyone who's interested in this interview, but it's a remarkable interview. So Master T is basically saying, you're saying some pretty ridiculous stuff on your album. Like you're saying you want to kill your mother, you want to kill, you want to kill your wife, all this type of stuff. And like, what are you doing here? And he said, this is his response. Can you honestly say you never wanted to kill someone? Has anyone ever put you through so much crap that you actually felt like killing them? I was expressing my views. Whatever is on my mind, I'm going to say it. I am that type of person. If I am evil enough to think it or smart enough to think it, I'm going to say it. Whatever it is, I will say it. So basically what he's saying there is, I'm not censoring myself. I'm just going to say whatever's coming to my mind. And basically using free association in music. And then just finally what he says is, my music is like my therapy. It's a way for me to get stuff off my chest. So I think the revolutionary potential in the art, just to make that point, I think the revolutionary potential for hip hop as an art form is kind of psychoanalytic in a sense, is that it's a way, and I see this potential in some people, even in the underground theory space, of people going into making hip hop songs. It's a way to sort of fully include your subjectivity into your creation, in a way that I don't think is really available to other forms of creation, certainly not in science, probably not in politics, arguably philosophy, and maybe some other forms of music. But I think hip hop is unique in how much subjectivity and how much speech you can bring to the table. I think that's quite unique. And so just to make kind of joke, I'll say two more things and then stop. I think there's many psychoanalytic theorists who often quote this joke that Freud made in a paper on negation, where he's basically saying, if the patient says it's not his mother in a dream, then it's probably his mother. in a psychoanalytic session. And I think, someone like Eminem is basically saying, no, it's my mother. It's my mother is the problem. So I think that's a funny psychoanalytic joke. But then the final just point, sort of bringing it back a little bit around to what Jason and Mikey were saying, I think free association and freestyle could be revolutionary for the subject. Maybe on an artistic level, we want to think about it revolutionary for the because so much of speech in the subject can be included. And I think in regards to law of non-omission, avoiding censorship, self-censorship, and the law of non-systematization, meaning, to privilege incoherence in a sense, is that it maybe affords us in the theory space an authentic way of talking about things like class, or talking about things like race. And especially in an academic environment where there's a lot of woke censorship around sensitive topics about sex and gender, for example. I think that's a revolutionary potential to bring into the underground theory space. So here thinking just fine, and then I'll stop, is thinking about underground theory itself as a freestyle. Thinking about and thinking about what, when we get together with podcasts, are we willing, and I'm talking about our subjectivity here and potentials in the future, are we willing to bring freestyle and free association to the table in our work? And here just finally at the point, and this is mostly related to what Mikey was saying, I think we do have a certain freedom as non-academics to play around with style and to experiment. And I think we have even a responsibility to lead the way and come up with new styles and come up with new experiments about what it means to play with the magic of words. And so I'll end it there.
Excellent. Great job. Thanks so much for that. All right, so now we've got to close it out, Tony, aka One Dime.
Yeah, so I'm really glad Cadell talked about the finding value in incoherency, because what I have to say might be a bit incoherent because I didn't come with a thesis or anything, or really just a bunch of points that I wanted to touch on and maybe open up discussion around. And some of them actually have already been brought up, like brought about the relation between psychoanalysis and hip hop. And I think when it comes to the listening of music, I say hip hop has been the genre of music that I listen to the most by far compared to any other genre. And I used to make playlists weekly of stuff I listened to that week. Like if I replayed it more than a couple times, I just put in a playlist. And it'd be like this week. And that's a really interesting way of actually kind of reading your own unconscious a little bit, because you can look back on that playlist and you can kind of retroactively see, oh, this is exactly like, this is what I was feeling like. It's a really way of documenting all your urges, all your repressed, or even things that you could be very aware of, desires and whatnot. It's certainly therapeutic in a certain sense, even though I hate that word. But more what I wanted to talk about revolves around the listening of music and enjoying music. And when it comes to the sort of reluctance people have when it comes to actually judging music, there's sort of this hesitation, this reaction people get when you try to judge music. They say, "Oh, why can't you just let people enjoy things?" That's the common thing. Why can't we just enjoy whatever I like, And this is a common reaction I got to with my video on the culture industry, which I won't summarize. I'd rather people just watch. But it's not. It touches on like mainly the ideas from Adorno's idea of the culture industry and the standardization of music, and what he calls the regression of listening. When music is, rather than art, it's produced into what he calls cultural commodities, and it's becomes pre-digested with formulaic patterns that kind of hears for the listener. So you're not really listening; it's almost stimulating you. There's a difference between playing an album front to back and actually like listening to it versus something playing almost repetitively that starts with a chorus and it just evokes a stimulus. It's a very different relationship to music. And in that podcast, I said taste of music is subjective. Obviously, what you enjoy is subjective, but that doesn't change whether it's standardized. And I also think it shouldn't really allow us to say like certain things are better. There is stuff that is like an art form, and then there's stuff that is just kind of like a mass-produced, what I call a fast food music. And there's a certain reaction which was, oh, why can't people just enjoy 21 Savage, Playboy Cardi, or whatever? And the thing is I enjoy a lot of people that I criticize. Like in the thumbnail, I put Drake just because he's the most recognizable, popular rapper. But I mean, like I listen to Drake music, like even though a lot of it's standardized, like you don't have to. You can enjoy things. I can enjoy McDonald's, but a McDonald's burger isn't going to be as good as like a very well made burger. Like and I think this word fast food music does capture sort of, I think, what we can distinguish as like a qualitative judgment on what is like better music or not. Because with fast food music, while you can enjoy it, and we all have our different forms of enjoyment, we often know that what we're listening to isn't even as good. But it does kind of have a certain effect, like in the sense that if you consume a lot of fast food, it's gonna be harder to appreciate like a good nutritious food. It's similar with like there's a sort of desensitization that occurs in your brain. And I do think that occurs with music too. If one's listening to music with standardized formulas that have beats that are just aimed to catch your attention as fast as possible, to kind of elicit as much dopamine as it can. That's why they start with choruses. They don't wait for a build up or anything. Stuff that has like more that doesn't have those standardized formulas and isn't as catchy, it's going to seem boring. It's not going to seem natural music. Like I don't know if you ever played like a hip hop record and the front to back, and someone who's not very well exposed to that kind of music, and they'll say like, "Oh, these beats sound boring." Like you get that with Nas music a lot, right? Oh, these beats are boring. They're not exciting. And if you would say like, yeah, but it's like good, and someone can say, well, it's my right to like 6ix9ine or whatever, like new rapper instead. And it's like, sure, but we can't act like everything is as everything is as good as everything else. It'd be a disservice to like the people who put way more effort into cultivating an actual album with actual substance. And I don't judge music based on whether it's political. And I think Jason made the point very early on that I like that our hip hop is not as only not revolutionary, not really ever, never really ever was, and I don't think we should expect it to be. It could be revolutionary in a certain sense, kind of like maybe what Cadell was talking about with regard to like opening up maybe a new sensibility. But in terms of politically, I don't think we should expect it to. Like I think arts and politics are separate, and politics is rare. Politics is something that we can't just say, if you talk about an issue, it's politics. It's not. I don't think like what most of us do is, I don't think none of us are really doing, unless you're doing like activism in real life, maybe probably not doing politics. Like I make political videos, doesn't mean I'm doing politics, right? So I think you can have great music that's not political at all. And I'm sure maybe we'll get into this afterwards. I actually prefer a non-political album than an album that is like a kind of token attempt to echo woke signifiers for the sake of it or whatever. And if it's poorly done, there's some great political hip hop. There's Dead Prez in the underground scene. There's obviously like Immortal Technique is pretty good. There's a bunch, right? But I don't think like to be a great, you have to be political. And when it comes to, okay, so like the relativism thing, I don't claim to have a criteria for what objectively distinguishes good and bad music. I think like that is such a difficult task. And I realized this very early on, a long time ago, when I tried to write a video. Sorry, I wrote an essay a long time ago on what I thought were like could be measured as like the top 10 greatest rappers of all time. And I had a bunch of criteria like influence, average rating of albums and stuff like that, and lyrics. But then I found it so hard to actually come up with it. It just all ends up being some blended into a bunch of subjective aspects. But still, that just shows like how much of a nerd I was when it came to this shit. But I'd write all that. It's actually when I wanted to start a YouTube channel, it's something I would have started with in this talk, but I guess we'll get to it now. Is like briefly my relation to hip hop is I almost started YouTube as a reviewer, like as an album reviewer, and I wanted to make videos talking about like the appeal of such and such artists and whatnot. But then I kind of thought, like, who cares? Like why? Like, what does my opinion on music matter? So I don't know. Then I didn't decide to do stuff until it was like more or less explaining things that I like read and stuff, and more politics, history, shit like that. But when it comes to music, I still have a deep love for it. It's what got me through work, got me through when I was working office jobs, got me through like when I was lifeguarding too. Like I used to DJ after as well. Like I'd have a pleasure putting people on to like a lot of good music, and I always appreciated when there's people I knew who knew way more than me about a certain genre of music to who I felt like I never believed the whole like, oh, it's everyone's subjective taste. Like, nah, if you have more exposure in a certain field, you have more reference points, and you can actually compare things to each other, you're gonna have like a better taste. You're gonna have I think what Marcuse calls like a breadth of subjectivity. Like when it comes to that thing, and I think relativism really it's the perfect ideology for capitalism. It's just like just let whatever market, which is supply and cultivate demand and supply that demand. Let that just the natural way of things, and not let's disregard any idea that there is like good stuff in or not. So I was always the type to seek out people who knew more about a certain thing to kind of learn from them, and then I would try to show other people that thing who are new to it. Like I remember Mikey and Cadell. You're talking before they know what they do. You're talking about the whole thing. Like I hate this idea that students in the university have to be given like an equal voice to the profs and stuff. Because like I'd rather listen to someone who's read Hegel for 10 years than someone who read him for 10 minutes. Like, sorry, like their opinion matters more. And it's like if you're exposed to music more, like I think it's the same. Like there's different levels of knowledge in different genres. I don't think one is objective. You can objectively measure like good and bad, but I'll take an opinion more seriously depending on how much of what they listen to. And so with hip hop, what I always did is I used to watch a lot of reviewers. There's this channel called Dead End Hip Hop with about 4 dudes. They've been around since like 2011, and they're some of my favorite viewers, particularly a guy named Mike Seatown. They would always give their opinions on music, and based on what they thought was good, I was like, okay, I'll give this a try. And I'd go on these niche underground blogs that would highlight like what they thought was the good music that they listened to. So I always took certain opinions more than others, and I think this idea though that like, oh, why can't you let people enjoy shitty things? It's like it's not about can or can't, but that's just enjoyment is like a separate thing, and like the idea of relativism, I think it's hard to have an antidote to that in terms of like an objective criterion, but it's like Rick Rogers was talking about in his lecture on Derrida and a common critique you get of postmodernists, which is of relativism, right? And he's saying obviously what someone like Derrida or Foucault, relativism, they're not saying just because you can't have objective values and objective morals doesn't mean everything is as good as everything else. Like you'd be an idiot to believe that. But I think the kind of relativism that is pervasive in capitalist common sense today, I think does have a like, oh, just there's no right way of there's just, and it plays into like really what is like the dominant mode of production and the type of music that will be prioritized by that mode of production, which is whatever's most going to give you the most clicks, whatever's going to cultivate the demand the best, through its like advertising, through its formulas and all that. And I think I guess It's why I like Adorno as a theorist and why I use culture industry, because he's someone who's critical of modernity, right? But he doesn't abandon things like reason. He doesn't. Um, he's still like a romantic when it comes to arts and stuff. And he may have had some shitty opinions on jazz. Probably wasn't exposed to it very much. I think he just heard elevator music jazz. Didn't actually hear like proper jazz musicians. But I don't know. That's speculation. Though I think like they say he's an elitist. That's a big thing. You're an elitist if you make judgments on music, and it's like, but I think we ought to have some like standards, like when it comes to everything. When it comes to political opinions, when it comes to um, who knows more about certain things about music as well. And I guess it's not a clear like thesis I have so much, but it is like an issue I want to raise just because obviously like that's a philosophically very old debate about like judgment and values and whatnot. And I think it's important when it comes to music because the idea that everyone has the right to enjoy, I think really pollutes like not only like the quality of music when it comes to like what one can appreciate, but also creation, because enjoyment, there's so many things bound up into that. There's fantasy involved into that. And I think when it comes to fantasy, especially, it's why a lot of people get into music for the wrong reasons, or I'll say like for very like for reasons that have nothing to do with music itself, the creation of music itself. Like a lot of people like the idea of being a rapper. They like the idea of being a rock star. So they kind of they like this is why I kind of have a beef with, I guess you could call mumble rap, just because like when I went to high school, so many people want to be rappers. So many people. It's incredible. Like, and people from the suburbs and shit, like who had nothing to say, but doing that, and it's very clear from any first glance that they just like the idea of it. They like the fantasy of it, as opposed to the creation of it. So when we say, can we let people enjoy things? Yeah, enjoying things isn't listening, right? Like listening to music and just enjoyment, or the indulgement of a fantasy, right? Because that's a big part of it. Is like you can listen to music and have this space where you imagine like your desires being actualized, but without the side effect of actually, when you get what you desire, it's actually kind of depressing, right? And so the fantasy allows you to kind of keep desiring. Listening to music can often, all kind of music, gives us a space to have these fantasies. It's a different process than listening to music, though. Just simply like actually listening to the art, right? So when we say like let people enjoy it, I don't think that's a really good objection to judgment of music. And I guess I don't want to go on for too long, but with regard to enjoyment, is one thing I do respect about hip hop, from a psychoanalytic standpoint, I guess, is that it was very, very, more than all genres, blunt about like people's desires, and that like this is why I fell in love with hip hop, like since I was like a little kid. Like I heard like My Name Is by Eminem, right? Like one of his first hits, and ever since then I was like hooked and listened to all kind of hip hop because it was very okay. So you know how Freud called
Tony.
Nietzsche the most self-aware man, right? The most self-aware person he ever saw. And I felt like with hip hop is that it never sugar-coated like people's basic desires for whatever, getting as many girls, getting money, whatever. It sounds like flashy and almost superficial, but it's like it's explicit about what a lot of people are, about what a lot of the desires people are, trying to have. And because of that, like rawness, I kind of respected it. And obviously, there's more eloquent ways of articulating those desires, right? Like there's Jay-Z, who I think, out of the materialistic rappers is probably like among the best,
Tony, hold on.
But then there's like, yeah, I don't want to go on for too long, but I guess I had some other things, but we can touch on it after, because you said Biggie, whenever the headline from Biggie to Baudrillard, I was going to say one thing about Baudrillard, but we can get into that after if you want, or just whatever, because I'm more curious to hear Mikey, because I knows a lot more about Baudrillard, so sort of almost a question.
Thank you. All right, so we're about to move into the Q&A panel, everybody, so get ready. Thank you so much, Tony. Thank you so much, everybody else, Cadell, Mikey, Jason. Now we're going to move into the Q&A portion, but really it's just kind of open floor for the panelists. This is a make-believe panel that we're all on, like you're sitting on one. We're all sitting around a table here. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the table. We've all said our piece as far as like how we're here, our ideas, we've shared them. And so I want you all to get an opportunity to ask one another things. And it looks like Jason's going to go first because he's got his hand up. Everyone can just take turns raising their hands and turn on your cameras if you want to join in. Here we go.
First of all, thank you everybody for speaking. There's some interesting things that have me thinking. And one of the things, Tony, when you were talking about the enjoyment of hip hop, well, first I want to address the whole critique of hip hop. I know you're a little younger, so there's one name you might remember. Gerald Horne used to be a very outspoken critic of hip hop in the 90s. And there's another black guy. He passed away not too long ago. I can't remember his name for the life of me. He had ashy ass lips and he was a music critic. They both hated hip hop. But one thing that they were very astute at doing was kind of calling out these contradictions of these kind of self-proclaimed ghetto dudes who had achieved a certain amount of fame and success. And we're talking about the problems of the inner city that they maybe had saw for a brief moment, but definitely had long surpassed that. And if I could find those articles, I think they were in Vibe in the early, whenever Vibe magazine came out. I don't even think it's a thing anymore. I'll have to find those for you because those are some interesting critiques of hip hop. Also, kind of the idea about enjoying quote unquote bad music, and that's kind of where I was coming from where it comes to hip hop, because there's a question that is not really asked too much, especially even in a lot of black circles, because it can get uncomfortable. And that is there such thing as black camp, or is it just cooning? I recently saw 2 videos that I was like, this is interesting, where one woman who was a larger black woman was rapping in front of a Burger King, and she was rapping into a donut, like a literal donut. And it was a little like, that's interesting. And then there's another song that's been very popular. I played this on my show. We couldn't help but laugh at it. That was funny, where the hook is like eating niggas ass. And maybe you guys know that song, maybe you don't. And I saw a video of this woman in the UK recently. I guess she's on tour. Ass eating theme is popular apparently. And she's walking around these people. It looks like she might be near Buckingham Palace. I can't tell. And she's like, "We about to eat niggas' asses." It's like, So, and it's an uncomfortable question to have. It's uncomfortable for me to ask in front of all these white people. Is there such thing as black camp within hip hop? And how much of it is camp and how much of it is cooning? Because there is something somewhat uncomfortable about like watching this stuff play out, because to hit a certain level of notoriety, you got to say and do some outlandish shit in music in general. And especially a genre like hip hop, I think we can all agree contemporary hip hop, unless you're in a certain lyric focused genre that you kind of stay in, as someone that's worked in all the big music festivals, to kind of be really, really popular, to get in these music festivals, there has to be something about you that isn't about your music that makes you popular. Like, I've been listening to rap. I'm 45, so the majority of my adult life, I've been listening to this music. I can't remember a time when a rapper has stayed relevant to be culturally relevant in their 40s, like Kanye West. Kanye West is still culturally relevant. How much of that is because of the music that he produces? And how much of that is because of just kind of the nonsense that he spews? It's been damn near 20 years since he said George Bush doesn't like black people. You know, he went from George Bush doesn't like black people and everybody being like, yeah, Kanye's my guy, and Blood Diamond songs to, you know, slavery was a choice. So, you know, hip hop is, to me, in an interesting phase that either people are a little too in love with it to admit that maybe it's gotten overbloated, like we saw with rock music in the 70s, where everybody had a plane and 20-minute solos and freaking laser light shows. And it feels like hip hop has gone that way, but there is no punk music to ground it. There is no underground of note to really ground it anywhere, because there becomes these fights, these intra-genre fights about what is authentic. So I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about that.
The floor is open.
He disappears then. Just drops that and disappears. So yeah, I can get out of here.
I'm still here.
I mean,
I'm just getting me out of the way.
I mean, the thing that's sticking out in my mind the most is your Kanye example. You know, in terms of staying relevant, culturally relevant. I mean, you could say Jay-Z was relevant into his 40s. I mean, there's a few rappers that stayed, but Kanye is very relevant, and it is about his personality, and it's about his capacity to attract attention as a personality. And you know, I think Tony's pointing in the right direction in regards to charismatic authority and sorcery and stuff like that. I think that if there are, I say something really simple, actually, is like there, and Mikey probably knows this the best. There are a ton, and even growing up, for me, like there were a ton of people around my neighborhood who were lyrically talented. Like there's a ton of people who are lyrically talented or musically creative, and they never make it. I think that in all genres of music, and hip hop maybe sticks out a little bit, but in all genres of music, I think you also have to have some sort of what I think they call it factor, or some je ne sais quoi, some I don't know what is some almost undefinable, unsymbolizable something that just for whatever reason attracts attention, attracts our gaze, and certainly Kanye's got it. Whatever it is, Kanye's got it.
Sean in the chat made the point that how do we explain Kendrick Lamar's cultural relevance? Because he's not exactly like the most charismatic guy, but he's very relevant and has put out excellent albums. So, I mean, there are exceptions, right, to the charismatic rule.
Kendrick Lamar feels almost manufactured. A good friend of mine who finally stopped rapping. He ghost wrote for people for years. He now writes the TV show Blind Spotting. He worked at a record store in Berkeley, California. And I remember walking in there, and I think it was the To Pimp a Butterfly album was on a end cap. And I pointed at it and I was like, is this record really that good? And he grabbed it. He's like, you remember Tribe Called Quest, right? And De La? I was like, yeah. He goes, yeah, you heard it already. There was something about Kendrick Lamar that resonated with older people my age. And for whatever reason, a great marketing ploy around the fact that he was from South Central that meant something to somebody. But there's definitely a lot of younger people that don't get him. I was at Coachella the year that he was on a main stage, there was tons of people there that just like didn't get it or care.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh yeah, I'm like I've been trying to figure out like what sort of space Kendrick Lamar like takes up in the culture, honestly, because like I remember when the one after To Pimp a Butterfly came out. What was that one? Whatever that one was.
Damn.
Yeah.
Oh, Damn was right after. Oh, yeah, that was the big one. Yeah.
When Damn came out, I remember I was going to school in a very white town in Bellingham, Washington. And I remember like when the day that came out, as I was driving around, like every single college kid was listening to that out their window. You could not go anywhere in Bellingham, Washington without hearing Damn everywhere you went. So I was like, but then like when I'd hang out with I lived in Vegas for a little bit, and I would like when I was hanging out with these guys from like who had moved there from Chicago. They were in like the south side of Chicago, and like they listened to all gangster rap and stuff, and they just had nothing to do with Kendrick Lamar, nothing at all. They were like, "What is this like?" It was like I think it was like moralistic to them. You know what I mean? And too preachy or something.
You know what it is? There's a lot to be said about the dancing aspect of hip hop and keeping the party going. There's a song that's been out for about 7 months now. Little Uzi Vert. I just want to buddy in here. I just want to, and it's a fun song. I have no idea what he's saying. I don't even think he's saying words. I don't care. It's a cool song to listen to. It makes you want to dance. I have never seen the video. I had no idea who sang it. Came across the video recently, and I was like, "Oh, this little dude can really gig. He's a dancer. I finally get him now. That's why he wears the crazy clothes. He's a dancer. Hanging around with the hip hop scene and dancers. You get that. Considering how good the production is for a lot of Kendrick stuff because of kind of the scene that he was also around, Flying Lotus, Thundercat. All these people come from LA, but they come from like big time music families. So these aren't just like regular cats, meeting in the lunchroom in the hood. You know what I mean? And so he had some really kind of amazing production, but it wasn't arena production, in my opinion. Maybe Damn was, because they tried to push him on those kind of arena shows, and he did really get big for a minute. But it just, I don't know if it resonates the same way with much younger people than maybe his South Central older contemporaries like Ice Cube. Like if Ice Cube, if cats remember, he was like the Malcolm X of NWA. That's how they pitched Ice Cube. He was the woke guy. And think about those solo records, maybe post working with Hank Shockley and the Bomb Squad when he's working with like DJ Pooh. You can put those records on right now and rock a party. Can you say the same about a Kendrick record, maybe outside of Damn? I don't know.
Jason, I found this question about camp really interesting, and coming from this background I have in Lacanian psychoanalysis, we whenever we're doing analysis or thinking about something, one of the key concepts we always go to is the phallus, and basically it boils down to part of what the masculine position is about is being the man. The one exceptional figure who doesn't lack anything, it isn't vulnerable, can do anything, has all the power, etc. And yet, one of these insights that psychoanalysis shows us is whenever somebody tries to prove that they're the man, it pivots into the comedic, because the greatest way to show that you are a lacking, that you have vulnerabilities, you're not capable of everything, right, is to try to prove that you, in fact, don't lack anything. It's the surest way to prove it. And I think there's these moments in hip hop where you see this breakdown in the kind of gangster persona where, I mean, Eazy-E was he was so over the top sometimes, like
my favorite of the NWA.
you know, and it's lovable in a way, right? It's lovable, but it's almost lovable because it's like, yeah, he's going so far with it. He's exaggerating to the point where it became comical. One of the rappers I love growing up, which now, like when I hear it now, I can't help but kind of giggle, is Brother Lynch, where you know, and I love Season of the Sickness. I love Loaded. Those were two of my favorite albums back then. But,
Load it up.
You know,
Prime Dyke in the cup.
But the lyrics, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna go to the point of I eat babies. Like it gets to the point where, you know, and from one perspective, if you're viewing it from one way, it's the most shocking, horrific rap, and then with the slightest of pivots in perspective, it becomes utterly comical.
But would you agree? Would you guys all agree that it was that silliness? I remember being in a car listening to that in like 1998, 99. I think that Loaded comes out. Mm-hmm. And I remember, you know, times getting tough. Might even have my mom out here wearing a tight dress, you know.
See, like there's almost an Eminem element to it, but it's almost like because Eminem, and there's a racial thing, because M's white, it's just taken as a joke. But like it's almost like a racial double standard where, like, if a black guy says it, it has to be taken serious, and there's no room for joking.
But that's what's so weird. We all knew that it was a joke because I don't know. Cracked up. Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, I'm sorry, Cadell. Go ahead.
I just wanted to push back on the taking it a joke thing, because at least when M first came out, like, I mean, he was saying like, if I say bitch or if I say faggot, everyone thinks it's a big deal. Mm-hmm. But like if another rapper says it, it's just another. Anyway, I just wanted to. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Jason.
No, you know, Eminem. Let's extrapolate Eminem for 5 seconds here. Like really, because what I find fascinating about this group of people talking here is, and let me first shout out. I love Tony. I have a lot of respect for Tony. He's one of the young people that give you hope for the future, right? That being said, you know, you weren't around when Eminem came out. You know, I remember before he had the deal.
But like I was a kid.
What year were you born?
You know when the super cutoff generation. I'm right at the cutoff. So
you know, I remember hearing about.
Let's just say I came out right before, like a couple years before Eminem came out.
I know you were born around the time I graduated high school. God damn it! So you shut up.
Yeah.
But anyway, I remember around the time I graduated, people were talking about this guy Eminem. And it was before he had the deal with Dre. Because those things he was doing with Royce da 5'9" were kind of making the rounds, and he was dope, man. We all knew Eminem is dope, and there was this world where, if you know the rap crew Living Legends and Hieroglyphics, like those were all the dudes that I kind of came up with in the Bay Area scene, and being kind of outrageous is just what you had to do lyrically. We weren't gangsters. None of us killed anybody. Regardless of where we lived, we weren't murderers. You know what I mean? And we weren't talking about that. And when Dell had dropped, it was like a breath of fresh air for a lot of us. Yeah, Dell the Funky Homo Sapien. It was like a breath of fresh air. And then by the time
you like Cool Keith?
Say again?
You fuck with Cool Keith?
Yes. I do enjoy
Cool Keith. Cool Keith is like, I think, the most most underrated rapper of all time. Because
I think MF he gets Doom. A lot of respect, but I see what you mean by underrated.
He's just not known, like even by a lot of hip hop. Like,
maybe for a younger generation, but he's definitely well known.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But even if people in the 2000s, like, because he's like MF Doom's dad. You know what I mean?
I remember.
But
I
he's like
remember
the
Zeph Love
pioneer of
X,
that.
MF Doom. You know, some of the people listening, I remember KMD as well. But you know, when we think about like this moment that the Eminems of the world come to be, a lot of us have probably already been doing that style of hip hop for like 5 or 6 years. And I remember us sitting in a room in 1999 saying, what's the 2000 style going to be? Like, and I remember someone said, it's not going to be Eminem because that's old. We've been doing that already. It's not Eminem. And lo and behold, people still sound like Eminem. Especially when it comes to more of the freestyle rapping stuff. So I find Eminem fascinating because also too, remember his first tours he goes out with, to your point, Cadell, is with, was it NSYNC and Britney Spears? He gets the Jimi Hendrix treatment where it's like, we're going to send you out with the Monkees and you're going to get booed off stage every night. So Eminem's rise to me is very interesting because he's always was lyrically tight. And he's never really done anything to disrespect his hood or his homies. I mean, D12 gets a record deal because of Eminem. You know what I mean? He's about as keeping it real can possibly be. I think. And that is why he gets so much hate, you know, and also love. I again, I was at the Coachella the year he headlined, and he brought out tons of people to rap with him. And I don't know, he's. I haven't really listened to the stuff he did later on.
Good.
You know, it got a little redundant. You know what I mean?
It got a lot worse.
But that dude, legitimately, there's like a handful of rappers. And this is just my personal opinion. And it is going to be biased because I'm old as shit. I heard the latest Andre 3000 verse he did on that Killer Mike thing. I was like, damn, that dude is still hard. I still love Method Man and Redman. I think those dudes are some of the hardest cats around. I was very, very happy that Souls of Mischief is on tour for their 30-year anniversary of 93 Till Infinity. And I still think they have incredible lyrical ability. But you know, that being said, you know, back to my earlier statement about that little Uzi Vert song, I there's some interesting stuff that younger people are doing. Who's the kid from Long Beach? Can't think of his name. You know what I'm talking about.
Staples?
Yes.
Vince Staples is amazing.
I love that dude. He's
very
My
smart
brother's
dude too.
favorite
You see his
is,
interviews?
Say again?
Which one?
You
I was
tell
saying,
me.
have you seen Vince Staples' interviews? Like he's
Yes.
a pretty sharp. He's a very sharp guy. Like,
Yes.
he's very funny.
He's fun. He's fun. Some, you know, hip hop also has to be fun, in my opinion.
But he's also just like a good MC, and like his albums are like very well structured and like have good production and, you know, cohesive. Like he's good. I think he's one of the best of like the, I guess you could say, the new generation or whatever.
He's one of the few people that I actually went to watch. You know, I work at a festival. I'm in an office. I did numbers for years. And if I had to go outside, I didn't want to hear anything. I was like, can you turn it down, please, Madonna? You know, I didn't want to hear anything. And there's two people. There's like a handful of people that I was like, oh, that's really good. Like hearing Lizzo for the first time. The first time I heard Lizzo was in Delaware, and it was on her first big tour. And I was blown away. She could rap. She could sing. She was super light on her feet. And she had like two people on stage with her and a DJ. And I hadn't seen that kind of performance because rap has kind of morphed into 1 million people on stage, rapping over your own vocals, not rapping over instrumentals, which is kind of it's just hard to hear. And to see somebody, I don't want to say bring it back, but be that entertaining and no one knew who she was. Blew me away. Just blew me away. So, I mean, I don't know. I think the genre, there's a lot of talent in the genre, but there's this authenticity bubble that to me kind of traps it from being anything more than don't know, urban, which is kind of Kanye's issue, right? When he always talks about not being allowed into certain elite circles. It's because he's looked at a certain way because he's a rapper. He's not Lenny Kravitz, the artiste.
Well, I think something that you've touched on a lot today, Jason, is basically the idea of keeping it real. And so something I wanted to ask all of you is what is keeping it real?
I wish I knew. I don't know. Because real is relevant, right? And that's the $1 million question for a lot of people. Go ahead, Tony.
Because like, what is your like actual will and the desire that what do you actually want to will into existence, and what do you desire to say, and how much do you actually, do that? I guess like so. That could be different things to different people. If they want to make a certain type of music, do they make it or do they compromise it? And with speech, I guess it's like, if you feel like people really need to hear something, are you going to say it? Or are you going to be prudent? Right. I guess that's what it is. Cause like, that's what I think keeping it real is literally, but obviously in hip hop, like what does it mean in hip hop? Like, I think what you're like referring to is how, keeping it real is just like how much you live up to like that persona, like that simulacrum of a gangster, which I think is like much more, it's taken on a much more of like a parody form in like the 2000s, especially now. Like a lot of them are just like, of like 6ix9ine, right? He's like an enigma, just like an enigma. He's fascinating. He's like a simulacrum that started off without a referent, but like he actually ended up, though the simulacrum ended up actually like becoming almost the real thing. Like he got himself involved into like gangster shit, and now he's like in jail. Insane.
Well, Lil, just if we're on that topic of simulacrum, there's this white kid from New York, Lil Mabu, who's literally doing 6ix9ine better than 6ix9ine, where he's become the simulacrum itself, like where he's not a gangster, but he's pretending he's a gangster, and no one cares. No one cares that he's not a gangster.
Yeah, like Rick. That is though, like Rick Ross is interesting because Rick Ross, is everyone knows, he is not like he named himself off of the real Rick Ross, who was like a real like crack dealer and shit. But his whole Rick Ross, the rapper's identity is fake, and this is like well exposed. He was a correctional officer. Yeah,
he's in the Won't There It Is video.
Yeah, and because his music, though, Rick Ross's music captures the spirit of like a drug dealing so well. Like people don't care; they know it. Like I saw this interview with Pusha T, who's like I think one of like the greatest like hope rappers of all time. Like, and he's formerly part of Clips. Like Clips, Clips is amazing, right? And he was saying, like, he was asked about it because like, how do you feel about Rick Ross? And he's like, well, he captures the feeling. So like that's what matters, right? Like, he captures the feeling, and it's like. And he's like, it's like watching a movie but listening to it, and that's what he compared it to. And I thought that was kind of interesting because like who at the end of the day, it's entertainment.
He won a lawsuit against the literal drug dealer. He won a defamation suit against the the literal drug dealer he's named after.
I didn't know that.
He won a defamation suit against him. That's insane. And what is that? Cadell and Mike, please enlighten me. You guys will forget more than I will learn about this shit. What does that mean when the simulacrum, as you say, becomes the reality? And I really think that's where we are. A friend of mine, I will never, ever forget this moment in my life. A rapper named Filthy Rich, maybe you guys know, maybe you don't, was doing a video where I lived. I lived in a warehouse in West Oakland. And they had rented a bunch of fucking expensive cars, Maybachs, it's fucking BMWs I had never seen before with Lambo doors and shit. And across the street from this warehouse was the largest homeless encampment in the city of Oakland. If you've seen the movie Sorry to Bother You, one of the early shots in the movie is that homeless encampment, right? As these big, we call them the zombie gate, this big gate opened up to get one car out to get another car in. As it opened up, like it's Maybach or something, opens up to drive out, the homeless people are having a barbecue outside. And a friend says, I took a picture of that moment, Jason, as the Maybach drives by the homeless encampment. And I put on it, all lives matter. Because hip hop has become such a living color parody of itself. And this video was shot on a green screen in a warehouse, you know, with rented cars.
Gives a new meaning to Maybach music. Maybach music.
It was the craziest day. The director for the video is this little Filipino kid. And some of the other people that were part of the entourage or whatever the fuck came in early. And I worked at this warehouse as well. And like, we're here for the video shoot. I was like, oh, well, there's a director right there. And he had like a crew of like beige kids, like kind of hippie hop kids, you know what I'm talking about? Colorful shit on. And he looked over and goes, that's not them. I was like, okay, but that's who rented out. I don't know what to tell you. And he sat there and waited until the rapper Filthy Rich came in. And then he looked just utterly shocked when Filthy Rich like shakes the little kid's hand and he's like, oh, hey, thanks for directing the video. It's like, who'd you think was fucking directing the video? Tookie Williams? Like, no.
But no, it's a great question. Like it's the question of the real, and in philosophy, you ask Kant that question, you get a different answer. You ask Baudrillard, you get a different question, different answer. And so, I mean, Baudrillard is incredibly relevant here because he was this thinker who he saw the emergence of electronic media as bringing about this privileging of images over what they're supposed to represent. That the image really takes over and becomes reality itself. And it gets to the point where you can't even differentiate between the real and the copy or the image. And so like, this is the reason Baudrillard, everybody thought that the Matrix really embodied his thought because, oh, see, you're trapped in the Matrix. And he goes, no. The Matrix doesn't get at what I'm getting at all, because ultimately, yes, there's a moment where you're trapped in the illusion, but you can get outside of it. And then there's this clear-cut distinction. The Matrix is the illusion, Zion and the machine wastelands, the real world. And so this sharp distinction between real and imaginary is actually maintained. But his privileged movie that he thought got his theory better was The Truman Show. Because in there, Truman, I mean, where do you differentiate between the real person and all of these images that have structured his whole existence, right? The line is completely blurred or imploded, and you're left in this kind of haze or disorientation where there's no clear-cut reality principle to rely on. But there's different phases of this turn from the real to hyper reality, as he called it. And ultimately, he thinks one of them is where the image overtakes the real or the reference. So, a painting, or portrait is supposed to refer to an actual person. But for him, when it comes to electronic media, especially nowadays on the internet, we see these deep fakes, we see this technology, and more images just are our reality. And so we're less and less inclined to measure an image in terms of the real and just measure the image on its own terms. And what gets murdered in this process is the real itself, is reality. He calls it the perfect crime.
Well, Cadell, I want to ask you. I want to ask you this, because this. I need you guys to help me figure this shit out. And I'm gonna play one of these videos on my show tonight, in our Champagne Room segment. There's a guy that does these videos where he walks up to usually Black people or Mexican people and tries to start a fight with them. These people are minding their own business in public places, sometimes walking, sitting on stoops, and he'll walk up to him and be like, "Why are you looking at me so crazy?" I'll be like, "We're not looking at you." And he'll just keep agitating the people
I think
until
I've
they
seen
find
one of these on Instagram or something.
Yeah, I think yeah. Or they'll pull a gun out, or they'll chase him, and he goes, "It's a prank, it's a prank, it's a prank, it's a prank." And I'm watching this, and I'm thinking, this seems. And I watched, no bullshit, maybe about 10 of them. And Tony, I know you know who this guy is. I think it's called Top Notch Idiots. I think that's what they're called. And I realized it's fake. Who the fuck pulls out because he was in California? Who pulls out a gun in a non-concealed carry state, and someone says it's a camera? You look at the camera, damn near wave, and then act like everything's okay. I don't think hoodlums have changed much from my day or my father's day. Somebody's going to get hurt, and that camera's going away.
Well, Jason, have you seen these other videos that go around there? I think they're similar to this, where they'll stage as if a couple's having a big fight or they're caught in drama, and you immediately there's some point where you go, oh wait, like it's almost uncanny valley in some modified form, where you go, no, this is bullshit. This is not the real thing. But what they're trying to do is all that matters in the attention economy. The main form of value is just how much attention you get. And so if it's sensational or spectacle or whatever, they're going to go for that. And so it's just about, and part of that is this kind of Baudrillardian pitfall of the I guess the most enticing forms of media right now or content are these simulations of real drama that aren't real.
This guy has 4 channels. Of the 4, 3 have well over 1 million followers. Now, again, he could have created these, but that still costs a lot of money. What happens to people who eat this content up as reality? Because I do think all this kind of plays into hip hop. This is all kind of part of hip hop culture, right? Really, what are we doing when this becomes reality? And I'm asking because I don't know.
Tony, Cadell, you want to tackle this one?
I don't know. It's really hard because it's like there's like, we could use normal people language, and then there's Baudrillard, who uses literally every term in the most opposite way that we're used to thinking of. So it's difficult. Like, it really depends on what the answer you're looking for. Like, if it's in general or if it's like Baudrillard, because Baudrillard is just the way. I know in my mind, if you use the word illusion, talking about Baudrillard, I know you but didn't mean illusion that way, because I know Baudrillard a very opposite way, right? So it's like different. Like, it really depends, like, I guess, what we're answering here.
I'm just going to ask, like, what happens to a populace that kind of eats all this stuff up? We're already talking about people that are pretend gangsters becoming, people don't care that this guy's a pretend gangster. Everything's pretend. It's interesting. Post-motivation, right?
Part of it is, I think, is what this does is if you keep these lines blurred between reality and imaginary, it keeps people from actually reaching the real. Now, this is this distinction I would make between reality and the real. And this is where we shift from Baudrillard to Lacan and Žižek. But the basic idea is that there's points in society that are contradictory or antagonistic. And what it boils down to, there's these traumatic points, whether it's wage labor or poverty or whatever. And there's these structural deadlocks. There's these built-in points within the structure of society that are traumatic, that sustain inequality, sustain unfreedom. And if you can prevent these real gaps, and we call them gaps, but they're basically the parts of society that are built into society, but that society doesn't want to recognize. They want to sweep these under the rug. They want to have us focus on anything except these. because these are actually the core structuring problems. They're structural problems, structural conflicts. And if you can keep us entertained and keep us from focusing on them, then you can sustain the status quo. And the only way to truly change society is to go to these centers of conflict, contradiction, struggle, and to hone in on them. But that's precisely what ideology is essentially set up to keep us from doing.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, building on that, to me it's like when we go into the reality of whether it's talking about the reality of the spectacle or the simulacrum or whatever, to me it's we have this society which is set up on specular images which are precisely designed to avoid the real in the way that Mikey's talking about. And so, like, to bring it back to keeping it real, like, what does it mean to keep it real? You know, to me, it's about staying with the contradiction and staying with the cracks in one's own life, in one's own personal life, like whether that's, you know, like, I'm just struggling to get by. I don't know how to both stay true to philosophy and make a living in a technological hyper-capitalist reality, right? Like, that's my day-to-day struggle. That's where I am, and that's where I'm thinking, and that's what I'm trying to resolve. Or, you know, that's just me. But, you know, whoever it is, whatever your real is. But to me, keeping it real is precisely not giving in to, like, I'll just go back to that. The reason why I used that one interview from 1999 that I was quoting, where I'm saying, whatever's on my mind, I'm going to say it. If I'm evil enough to think it, I'm going to say it. Whatever's on my mind, I'm going to say it. Is like, I don't think no rapper thought killing my baby mama is going to get me 5 million albums sold. No one thought that. Everyone thought like that joke skit, right? On the first albums, he had that joke skit with Steve Berman, where Steve Berman's like, Dre's giving me albums with blunts, 40s, and bitches. You're talking about homosexuals and Vicodin. Get the hell out of my office. Like, so what I'm saying there is, like, we have this, and you've talked to this, I think you've pointed towards this, Jason. There's these ridiculous specular images in hip hop, right? And, like, there are these ridiculous specular images in many different, like, there are ridiculous specular images in Hollywood, right? Like, there are ridiculous specular images in pop music. Like, that was whole, like, going back, like, just because you brought it up as well, like, I saw M came out as, like, an assault on boy bands, because that was, like, the specular image of the time. Like, boy bands were, like, ridiculous, and, like, Lou Pearlman built the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, and it was all a fucking joke. It was all a fucking specular image.
Most of them had bleached blonde hair,
and so it was a big joke on that, right? Like, so to me, it's like, I think, like, in the reality, like, here's the thing, and this is where I'm gonna stop with this. I feel like it is revolutionary in some sense to keep it real in this internet environment. Because it is so fucking easy to, like, generate a specular image and just fucking try and make money off of that. Like, if you're keeping it real, it's hard to meet other people who are keeping it real, and it's hard to build long-term relationships and that's one of the reasons, to be honest, just to wrap up, that's one of the reasons that attracted me to Dave and Theory Underground, and why not, you know, Mikey's another great example of someone who I think keeps it real, and I think it's people who are keeping theory close to the bone. It's people keeping theory close to where they really are. And I think if we go deeper into that, we're not going to get this, like, ridiculous, stupid, specular image, which is just a sort of a phantasm that doesn't exist. It never is going to exist. But we're going to have the potential to build real relationships or something like that, and have conversations that maybe will help us think in ways we never thought before. So that's what I think.
You know, and I love that. I think this phrase, keeping it real, I think it's contradictory, and I think there's two meanings or at work in it that are opposed to one another. So on the one hand, keep it real, often within hip hop has been like, stay authentic to yourself, right? But if that also means stay authentic to your image, well, then you have an issue. But if keep it real changes to keep it authentic with your lack, the way you lack in society, these traumatic struggles you're always facing, then that's the sense of that phrase I would want to affirm. Where that's where the important thing is affirming the ways in which you lack. And race, gender, all of these different identities come with their own struggles, their own lacks, but there's also universal lacks we all have in common. And economics is a big one, right? The issue with economics. And I think if we keep it real in the sense of keeping it focused on these lacks, then that's the complete opposite of trying to keep yourself aligned to some ideal image of yourself. The complete opposed opposite of keeping it real in relation to your lack.
Here.
Oh, I have a kind of response to that as it pertains sort of to, like, I guess you could say what we're all kind of doing with regard to podcasting and like political commentary or whatever. Because, I think always being oneself without any sort of prudence, like, isn't really wise if one is trying to, like, if you're in the political sense, if they're trying to, like, communicate a message to an audience, right? Like, depending on how, because we've got to always consider that, like, the audience who you're speaking to. However, right, I think, like, rather than, like, just one can easily use the idea of keeping it real just as a way of saying, like, I'm just going to be as edgy as possible. And you get people like Jimmy Dore, who I think their brand is being edgy, but they don't really say a lot of anything, Like, one can be edgy and they're not saying anything, or they're not being they're being transgressive. They're not really being rebellious. But I like the term, instead of, like, keeping it real, I like the word, at least as it pertains to, like, what we're all kind of interested in doing, I guess, is the word, like, paresia, or paresia, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but paresia, like, this comes from, like, Socrates and Plato's commentaries on Socrates, and how the concept of paresia is basically saying what you want to say in a way that, like, it's not actually convenient or beneficial for you to say it, but you truly believe that it'll help the other person. Right? So you're going to, like, say what you think is, like, a truth that will somehow be useful or fruitful to someone or people, even at the cost of it not being convenient. So, like, I like that concept of like paresia when it comes to, like, truth telling or whatnot, because you can say, like, say what I think, like, that's cool, but, like, in a political context, I mean, a lot of people don't really think anything, so they're just going to be parroting whatever they hear, and what's, like, great, fantastic, like, it's like, oh, I'm so transgressive because, like, I'm the next person to make fun of trans people again. It's like, oh, great. It's like all the comedians now, who's against political correctness? Like, bro, everybody, like, Dave, I think, has something he wants to say.
Yo, so thank you, everybody. I want to give you each kind of a moment to kind of close out your thoughts on this segment, and then you're welcome to, and I hope you'll be here for the little after party we're going to be doing here. I know that at some point here in the near future, Jason's got to go to his show, but we'll have a little bit of time for the people who are involved in the hardcore panel to turn on their microphones, their cameras, to hop in here, for Nance, for George to get in here. And but how about you each kind of, so far with where the conversation's at, closing out this segment, moving into the conversation with hardcore, do you have any kind of closing thoughts for this segment?
One of us panelists, or one of us panelists.
Oh yeah, all you.
First of all, thank you so much for having me. This was a blast. I do have to go get ready for my show TIR, as Cadell, you'll be happy to know we'll be talking about Canada and its right-wing turn. Tony, you'll be happy to know we'll be talking about Canada. Yes, I do talk about Canada a lot on my show. And I have, you know why I do? Tell you guys this, because I hate the other people that don't talk about Canada and they're Canadian. They just talk about the West.
With our flappy heads.
Yeah, that's why that's the image on the that is I didn't create that. No. I'll just say I didn't create the thumbnail. But I for me personally, these two genres of music, the one through line I see between these two genres of music and also what we do for a living is something that Tony touched on, and that's kind of ideas around authenticity. I'm working on something I'm procrastinating on way too much, talking about ideas of authenticity, kind of juxtaposing the creation of the teenager and the creation of rock music to Milli Vanilli. And I think it's going to be fun when it's done. and I can't wait to drop it on you guys. But this was an illuminating talk for me. I appreciate being able to be around cats that think like this. This was like the most fun barbershop talk I ever had. So you guys are all welcome to come with me to the Hood Barbershop in Richmond, California. We can have this same conversation in the barbershop.
Say white people can have barbershops too. We're allowed. We can have a cool barbershop.
Oh, hey, barbershop conversations are barbershop conversations, right? Everybody has a barber. We can walk into the whitest neighborhood. There's somebody right now having there's that one fake deep asshole at a barbershop somewhere in Montreal talking bullshit. But and I want to shout out Mikey. Kansas City has the best barbecue in the nation.
Yes. All right. What's your favorite spot here?
My first time in, I'll be honest, you're gonna call me a poser. My first time in, I was on tour with the band, and the only place that would open my first, because we got in town late, was Gates.
No, I love Gates. Is one of the best.
They opened up for us, and they made food for us special because we were coming into town, and it was, to this day, it's like a fucking pilgrimage for me if I'm in the area, which I haven't been for some time, is to go get barbecue in Kansas City.
It really is like our thing, and we everybody here and we don't take it for granted. Like, we are so lucky to have Bryant's and Gates and Jack Stack and all the other ones, and that was the first thing I did when Dave came to town for the first time, was take him to Jack Stack. It was the only place open at the time, and so and then
you guys do it right.
Gates and Bryant's, I took them to all three of the big ones.
And you have a dope music scene, man. I used to play at a record bar in KC, and I had a ball at that place. So much love, even though y'all killed Mac Dre. Much love.
Oh God, I was coming. I knew. Oh God, I love Mac Dre.
Much love. I know you didn't do it, but much love to you guys, and again, thank you for
and back to you.
This was great. I'm definitely going to take a lot of this stuff that we talked about today, and I am going to talk about it in my show in the Champagne Room after we have a very depressing conversation about Canada and its right-wing turn. But thank you so much, brothers, for letting me do this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Have a good rest of your night, man.
I'm gonna catch that episode for sure.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to all of you. This is great.
So
yeah. Well, I guess I just want to say how cool it was to have a conversation with the three of you. Jason's gone now, I guess. But no, like, seriously, like, I love This Is Revolution. I love One Dime. I love Philosophy 4. It's so cool to have, the people from each one of these channels that I appreciate so much. Like, when I'm sitting, my whole thing is whenever I'm writing, I can't just sit down and write. Like, that's all I'm doing. I always have a YouTube video playing, and like, all you guys are just constantly on my playlist or whatever whenever I'm writing theory. And so, it's just really cool. I mean, it's awesome to talk to one of you one-on-one, but to have you three here was just so cool to me.
Yeah, I really wish Nick and Andrew could have joined. And I think we're going to have to do a follow-up one that gets them in on the conversation for sure. But I think they're really busy and traveling right now. But I know that's going to be a killer conversation.
And
And then there's going to be some kind of publishing opportunity probably at some point for like an anthology on this topic, you know. And so I know some of us are thinking about something that we would write in the future towards that end. But really quick, Nance and George, because this is now when we can combine with the hardcore panel, go ahead and camera on, mic on, if you can, if you are able, if you're around.
I'm gonna drop out, but it's 1 a.m. for me. But yeah, I'll just say thanks, Dave, for putting this on. Mikey, nice to meet you one time. And yeah, I mean, I think if we could keep exploring the relationship between hip hop or music and theory, and I think you opened this up, Dave, with the music scene versus the intellectual milieu. And that's always something that I was attracted to. Anyway, with you guys doing the memes, the young Žižekian thing, it's bleeding the music and the theory. And I think that's a direction that's interesting to keep following. So thanks, everyone, and I'm out.
Thank you. Get some rest.
Peace, Cadell. Go ahead and end this recording. That was pretty much the end of the hip hop segment.
Yeah.
And now a quick message from our sponsors. Just kidding. This will be neither quick nor from any corporate or state sponsorship.
What's up, everybody? Thank you so much for watching all the way through. The fact that you made it to the end means you get a gold star. Yeah. What I'm going to do with this little bit of time remaining at the end is give you the quick rundown on everything. I'm kind of assuming an audience of people who are not reading all the emails that I send out, who are not registered with Theory Underground, who are not taking ongoing courses at Theory Underground. And so you might be someone who's come to the channel for the first time, in which case you probably just think that this is a YouTube, in which case, well, of course, you're partially correct, but mostly wrong. Because if you look right here, what I have is a course site. It is its own platform on theory-underground.com. But it's not just courses. These courses are gateways to a bigger and more important conversation that is just getting started. And really, after this next month that I'm taking off to get married and to go on a honeymoon, once I get back, the conversation and the events really kick into gear. There's going to be a national tour that will have a sort of international component, not just because it's online, but also because we will be going into Canada, Mexico, as well as potentially Europe. So stay tuned. I mean, we've been invited to Hong Kong. There's talk about going to Thailand. But it's kind of dependent on the people who reach out to us and talk to us, because this is all word of mouth and DIY. I'm not doing marketing. I'm not really trying to pursue new clicks through the algorithm outside of basic cooperation kinds of projects that I do with people like Todd McGowan, Chris Catrone, Nina Power, Daniel Tutt, etc. The point of doing what I'm doing with all of them is to say, yes, this is a part of a bigger conversation. This is this is beside everything going on with the media left and TheoryTube and Theorygram and all of those other things that are happening in the theory scene. But what I hope to establish through Theory Underground is a more rigorous and hybrid, sustained kind of dialogue with the people who are really serious about the life of the mind. And so, that means not just watching videos here and there and then telling other people, oh, I've got opinions, and then these videos say something about me, but instead drilling down into fundamental concepts, questions, problems, tracing out the contours and inherent constitutive contradictions of the fields that we are in. And so what I hope to see come out of the theory scene is an intellectual milieu, but this can't just happen overnight. It happens over time. And these courses are just to be a part of that unfolding. Most of these have already happened. So, Mikey teaches Žižek's For They Know Not What They Do. While he's teaching that course, I was simultaneously demonstrating how to be an active, critical, engaged student, right? And I did this exact same thing with the What is Sex course, where really it was Cadell last from Philosophy Portal who was heading up everything, but it was me who was kind of modeling that student. But I also have co-instructed some courses here, like the Professional Managerial Class Consciousness and Ideology course that I co-instructed with Elton L.K. of the Working Class Intelligentsia and the Dead Parrots Philosophical Society. Elton L.K., great guy, love him. But, he's just one of these people who are in my organic intellectual milieu sort of network. And then the people that have come in through the virtual have an opportunity to ground out into that organic network by meeting up with us on tour. A couple of other people in that organic network who are here from the very beginning, and I've done stuff with them with a lot of other previous projects, was Brian Weeks and Ann Snellgrove, who are co-instructors for the Idea of the University course right here, which was the first course launched at Theory Underground. But if you want to meet some of us, if you want to actually ground out in the organic network, if you want to actually break through the walls that kind of come with these media form and actually get the vibe, you'll want to meet us in real life, in person. And we are prioritizing the people who are reaching out to us and filling out the form for the Theory Underground US Tour 2023. And so if you go to the tab on the website, on the header called events, you go to the drop down for US Tour 2023, then you can fill out this form here, and then there's a high likelihood that we'll try to do one of our events in person wherever you are at. And so we're trying to add only real people who are serious about meeting in real life, because if you prefer to stay in the role of a consumer, of someone who just kind of subscribes to content and clicks on it whenever you're just kind of distracted from whatever you're doing, that's totally fine. But if you're actually looking to get to another level of discourse where it's not just we're talking at each other, but instead we are in a field and we actually have reference in that field that go beyond just idle chatter, then you'll want to get involved with this for sure. So that's the main thing. I wanted to tell you that once I come back from the honeymoon and the time away for the wedding, the events are really going to kick off. The tour is going to be what I'm focusing most of my energy on. But at the same time that the tour launches, so too will 2 books be published from Theory Underground. One is my book, Timenergy, and the other book is Underground Theory. There will be big names such as Slavoj Žižek, Norman Finkelstein, Todd McGowan, Alenka Zupancic, as well as Nina Power, Daniel Tutt, Chris Catrone, and a lot of nobodies like me. Just people who have either dropped out of the university system or never even enrolled, who are nonetheless passionate about studying theory as a way of life. That's what this book is. It's 31 contributors towards underground theory, as well as critical media theory, ideology critique, the left and its critique, and there's even some essays in there on historical interpretation and the history of philosophy. So these 2 books, the Underground Theory book as well as my Timenergy book, will be published and available September 1st. And that's basically when we kick off the tour. So if you want us to come to a city near you and talk about these books or do any kind of an event, then reach out, fill out the form. And as far as Timenergy goes, you can see right here, I've actually got the Timenergy course is now listed. This course is going to begin in September. So if you've been interested in the concept of time energy, if you're interested in a deep dive through the history of philosophy, drawing from philosophers as ancient as Aristotle through to more modern metaphysicians of time like Bergson or Kant, then this is definitely for you. But if you're even more interested in abstract time and domination through someone like Moïse Bastone, a sort of post-Marxist, or actually Marx, Bourdieu, Foucault, we could talk about disciplinary time, existential time. We're going to bring in Adorno. We're going to bring in Nietzsche, Arendt. This course is going to be going through the history of philosophy, mostly focusing on time, but also leisure and freedom as fundamental concepts, and developing time energy as a sort of imminent critique of many of these philosophers and many of these theorists, and of pretty much the entire political scene as it currently exists. And so this will not be a super intensive course. You're not going to be assigned entire books to read. There will just be a monthly lecture, sort of seminar lecture, as well as a monthly check-in kind of discussion group, right? And that discussion group is one that's going to happen very much like the critical media theory reflection cohort discussion group that's currently also ongoing. So if you are not already signed up with the critical media theory research cohort, then you'll definitely want to get signed up with this time energy research cohort, because it's going to be arguably as good or better than the critical media theory one. But both of these courses are not too intensive. Both are ongoing, and it's never too late to join the critical media theory one either, right? We've already gotten a bunch of signups 2 months after the fact, because this isn't something that will just end in 6 months. We're going to repeat it. And for the people who join late, they actually get to be in the next one as well. So get involved with the time energy course and the critical media theory course. Same thing goes with the being in time course. We're reading all the way through Martin Heidegger's Being in Time as one of the most profound, difficult, and important deconstructions and critiques of everything that we take to heart, that we presuppose just taking for granted as natural, as subjects of modernity. This is what we do. And Heidegger is one of the greatest enemies of modernity, as is obviously Friedrich Nietzsche. And so both of them are the kinds of frenemies of any serious thinker who's trying to interrogate their own most closely held presuppositions, right? And so if you've ever thought about taking on a challenge like reading Being in Time all the way through, then it's not too late. You can actually still enroll in this course, and you can do the reading on your own for Division 1 over this next month. And then once you're caught up and you've gone through the lectures for Division 1, Division 2 will actually begin once I get back in mid-August. Okay? So there's a tour, there's books, there's courses. What more could I possibly add? There's an app. And that's been something that has taken a lot of my energy and effort away from Theory Underground as a website. It's because I've been mostly problem solving the app for the last few months. But what I am currently showing up on the screen here are tickets. Every time there's an error with the website or my app, I have to open a support ticket with someone who's responsible down the line for figuring out how to problem solve the bugs. And so I've opened 1 million tickets. As you can see on the screen, these are tickets that I opened between basically mid-July and the beginning of May. But then I can go back, and I'm just showing you on the screen all of these different tickets, almost as a way of showing off that I've been doing constant troubleshooting in the background, because I'm on the fly learning how to operate and run not just like the sort of ins and outs of a course-based or course-gated social media site, but more importantly, that I'm building the actual platform, and that I'm doing it where I have to troubleshoot everything with programmers, a team of programmers. And it's all good preparation for what I hope will happen as Theory Underground gets a little bit more steam over the course of the next year. Eventually, I'll have a dedicated team of programmers, not people who are like these people, divided between 1 million different tickets that they are problem solving, but instead having my own dedicated team. Anyway, so the app, right now all I'm showing you is that there's a lot of support tickets opened, but we've actually reached a point now where I think that the app is about to go out. And if you're curious about that, just know that it's going to have like the capabilities for you to be able to message people who are on Theory Underground, for you to be able to partake in the forums and social groups, the social groups, including the multilingualism, language learning clubs, as well as the film club. But more importantly, it will be a way to subscribe on a monthly basis so that you have access to everything going on at Theory Underground. Not just all the courses, not just all the conversations, but also all of these B-side specials that we've been doing. These are not listed on the regular website. They're not listed on the YouTube channel. They're specifically reserved for people who are subscribers, who are really plugged into the kind of ongoing conversation. And so if you're curious about that ongoing conversation, just know that there are Theory Underground hub events. That's kind of what we're calling them for right now. But basically the hub events are like this one coming up here. Like right here, as you can see, there was a hub event on July 11th. There's another hub event coming up on July 18th. And as you can see, there's an office hours event that happens during the hub event. But more importantly, there's a panel of presentations on hardcore theory, a panel of presentations on hip hop, as well as a special segment on critical media theory reflections, where even if you're not in that course, you still get to kind of partake in one of the things that's going on with that course. And these kind of hub events where it's like one Zoom call for the whole event, it's going to be like 6 or 7 hours long with different segments on different things, are really just an opportunity for people who are fellow travelers to drop in, to say hello, to kind of get the vibe, to see what's going on. And most importantly, for people who are in ongoing courses or in past courses, who have questions about the text, have questions about the lectures, who have reading reflections that they've done on that week's reading, who want to talk about it, to be able to come to the office hours, because every hub event will always have an office hour segment where basically the students in currently ongoing or past courses have priority, meaning that if you take this professional managerial class consciousness and ideology course, or the idea of the university course, or this, for they know not what they do course, any of these past courses that you take, you've got weekly questions as you go through it. You'll always have someone to come talk to during the office hour events that are happening at the Theory Underground Hub on a weekly basis. So I just really want to stress that, because otherwise you might feel like, oh, I'm left behind. These courses are already in the past. They're already over. There's nothing I can do. I just have to binge it on my own and I'd be all on my own. No. Not only is there a live ongoing office hours kind of event where you can come and discuss what you're doing, but more importantly, there's also the forums. And so a lot of the video conversations we have related to these specific courses, those videos get uploaded into the forums on those specific topics, and then you're looped in. And the people who have taken those courses in the past, they're reminded about the content of those courses, and maybe they want to go back over some of the stuff, and it kind of keeps the discourse centered around the subject matter, instead of just all of us talking, acting like, oh, well, we know what we're talking about. We know without even having gone through the same readings together. We just know that we all kind of know. We get it. No, this is what Heidegger calls idle chatter. This kind of communication that tends to happen online is symptomatic of what happens when all of the connections that we form are in these virtual networks that don't ever ground out in real life discourse. There's something about real life discourse with voices and faces and the actual kinds of non-perceivable pre-conscious things that occur in person that a lot of us are very removed from. And part of what I'm doing with Theory Underground is attempting to bring together my organic network with the virtual network. And so if you belong to the virtual network and you want to ground out in my organic network and actually get to know me and people that I'm fellow travelers with like Ann Snellgrove or Brian Weeks or Elton L.K. of the Working Class Intelligentsia, people that I have co-instructed courses with, that I have as sort of connections in real life. You know what I mean? It's going to be these events that are on tour, that are your best way of actually grounding out from the virtual into what I'm calling real life relationships, right? And so hybridity between IRL and fully consumer, algorithmically enticed online, whatever the hell we're doing on here. Ultimately, what I've built here with the app and the website, as well as the publishing arm of all of it, is an opportunity for people to be in an ongoing lecture, research, and publishing cohort, and to be able to ground out in something more real than just the, whatever you get from the algorithm, and that provides the conditions of possibility to go from just being a part of the theory scene, where it's influencers on platforms talking to fans or whatever, to instead become a fellow traveler in an actual intellectual milieu, where whatever you put into it, you'll get back 100-fold. That's what I'm trying to lay the groundwork for here, is the sort of antidote to so many of my frustrations at the university, or trying to organize outside of university, or just trying to be some kind of a YouTuber or whatever. No, so much more important is what's coming from this tour, from this app, from these courses. And so if you're watching this, if you're thinking about getting involved, there's no time like the present, because really it's people's involvement in the first couple of years that makes all the difference. I understand that the longer these PSAs and the more unpolished or underproduced or less frequently published this YouTube channel actually is, the lower engagement is going to be. The algorithms will continuously neglect, right? But it is the people who watch all the way through and to the end who are already pretty serious, and they're looking to potentially get more involved, and that's who I care about. And the channel can ultimately wither away and die, because what's coming from my own platform and from my own medium is something that is capable of something so much more than anything anyone's ever imagined could come out of the internet. And the Timenergy book and the Timenergy course are coming very soon, and a lot of people have been excited about that and have been wanting more on that. And so if you are one of those people who's excited about it, register soon. Go to theory-underground.com, go to the Timenergy course, register for it. There's 4 tiers of involvement. Those who do will separate themselves from those who do not. And it's the doers ultimately that are going to make the difference. So I hope you're one of them, and I'll see you on the other side. Take care. Peace.